Good morning. This is panel 2, Transnational Communities, the Political and Historical Contexts of Haitian Migration. We have as first presenter Professor Karen Richman. She is the director of the Center for Migration and Border Studies at the Institute for Latino Studies at the University of Notre Dame. She's the author of Migration and Voodoo, published in 2005. This is a multi-sided ethnography of a transnational Haitian community, which also includes a compact disc of spoken and chanted cassette letters exchanged between its scattered members. Richman is the author of many articles and book chapters on Haitian migration, religion, labor, and expressive culture, and has recently developed a second area of expertise in Mexican migration and culture. She won the Robert Heiser Prize for the best article in the field of ethnohistory for her 2008 article, Innocent Imitations, Mimesis and Alterity in Haitian Voodoo Art. She has also worked as an advocate for refugees and immigrant workers in the United States. And her presentation will be Run from the Earthquake, Fall into the Abyss, a Leogane Paradox. I present you Professor Richman.
Thank you very much, George. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'd really like to thank all of the people who helped organize this workshop, including Lenny. Thank you very much for everything you did. Stephanie Davis, and Jesse, of course, the director of the center. Corridor is a hamlet in the rural community of Thirivière in Léogane. It's also the anchor of a transnational community. Corridor is at the epicenter of the earthquake that struck on January 12, 2010. It's closer to the epicenter than either the capital city, Port-au-Prince, to the east, or the town of Léogane to the west. Whereas losses in the capital and the town were catastrophic, the people of Corridor survived the cataclysm almost unscathed. My presentation explains how the everyday practices of people in Corridor got them out of the way of the earthquake. I also address why, despite their survival of the catastrophe and their intimate and intricate ties to family members who reside outside, they're nonetheless standing precariously at the edge of the abyss. So quiero decir que Corridor es una comunidad rural en un lugar que se llama Léogane. Y yo quiero explicar cómo esta gente, esta comunidad, sobresalió bien, aunque están en el centro mismo del temblor de la tierra. Y al lado oeste hay Port-au-Prince, la capital del país, y al otro lado está la ciudad de Léogane. And here are some photos of the destruction in the city of Léogane, which some people say has been 90% flattened. So this is the town of Léogane, or the city of Léogane. You saw some photos from Marara in La Ville Léogane yesterday. Okay. And this is Corridor here. Okay. Okay. Corridor's social map comprises two locations, inside and outside, la calle ac dehors, right? Or lot bas, over there. Outside refers primarily to the counties of Broward and Palm Beach in South Florida. These are the main satellite settlements of this community, but members are also scattered to New York, Montreal, Guadeloupe, and France. Pues quiero decir que Corridor es una comunidad que tiene varios lugares, pero es una sola comunidad. Y la mayor parte de la gente que salieron, los migrantes, viven en Sud Florida, en Broward y Palm Beach counties, no en la ciudad de Miami. También hay miembros de esta comunidad en Nueva York, Montreal, y Guadeloupe, y France. Everyday discourse reproduces their consciousness as producers of mobile labor and consumers of migrants' remittances. Children grow up expecting one day to leave in search of life for a livelihood for their family. Chercher la vie pour famille, o buscar la vida para la familia. Mundane references to home in relation to outside further naturalize the reality of transnational labor migration. The peculiar but common experience of spatial dislocation is summed up in Creole or Haitian by the alienation of life from livelihood, la vie from vie. Life is inside, but the means to life, la vie, lie outside. To live in Haiti, you have to pursue life outside. Vivre en Haiti, chercher la vie dehors. Para vivir en Haiti o en esta comunidad, tiene que buscar la vida afuera. Y estoy hablando de, how do you say the consciousness? La conciencia de esta vida que viven en más que una parte. Yeah. Y que hay una separación entre la vida y la manera de buscar la vida. Hence, people work outside in order to live in Haiti. Despite the vast distances between these spaces, the members are intimately involved with one another. In the 1980s and early 90s, when I carried out ethnographic research in Corridor, writing on cassette tapes enabled distant kin to communicate with one another in their own eloquent vernacular. And they made writing on cassette into an aesthetic all its own. Now, every transnational household has a cell phone, allowing people to stay in constant touch, if they desire, and some don't, and the flowering, performative aesthetic of cassette writing has been displaced by telephone conversation, which has its own etiquette and forms. Pues dije que durante los años 80 y 90, cuando hice mis investigaciones, esta comunidad se quedó en comunicación muy íntima y usaron los cassettes, y dijeron que escribieron en los cassettes, ¿me entiende? Y la palabra écrit en criollo quiere decir, quisiera decir hacer una cassette. ¿Ya? Ahora nadie usa cassette para escribir cartas. Usan ahora el cassette o el video para grabar celebraciones, ceremonias, pero para comunicar todo el mundo usa el celular, teléfono. Y el migrante supuesta comprar y pagar el teléfono celular para la familia en Haiti. Before the earthquake, so now I have to translate back, so I added that the migrants are expected to buy and pay for the cell phone costs for the family back home. Before the earthquake, therefore, the members of this community had become accustomed to virtually instantaneous telecommunications across the distant locations of their community. When the earthquake severed communication, the silence was unbearable. The first good news came 2 days after the earthquake through a phone call lasting only a few seconds, long enough for Leogane to tell his mother, Messina, that he and the rest of their family were alive. Each treasured piece of news spread quickly to other families in the diaspora. By day 4, the joyous news confirmed that the residents of Corridor, Nampican, Coape, and other surrounding hamlets of T-Rivière, including Macomb, were là, meaning they were okay, alive. There was only mention of one life lost. Ironically, the nickname of the one man who died is Corridor. Pues dije que después del temblor de la tierra había un silencio enorme que era muy difícil porque todo el mundo estaba they were used to, estaban acostumbrados, sí, a esta comunicación instantánea. Pero poco a poco recibieron las noticias que todo el mundo estaba. Solo una persona murió. Y es en el centro mismo, el epicentro del temblor de la tierra. So, ¿por qué? Why did the people of Corridor survive? Despite the destruction on the east and the west sides of it that you saw. And in the aftermath of the earthquake, why are their lives still hanging in the balance? My immigrant friends didn't state why their relatives survived, because the reasons were obvious, but not obvious to those who are unfamiliar with their way of life. The ordinary habits of everyday life in the rural compounds of Corridor and beyond no doubt contributed to their survival. Most residents live outside, preparing meals, eating, washing, braiding hair, talking, playing, laughing. People only go indoors to sleep, to get something, or if it rains. They go indoors if they're sick. Indeed, a healthy person who stays inside during the day is assumed to be hiding something, doing something illicit, hoarding resources, which is a grave sin. The practice of working inside is associated, being inside is associated with the practice of sorcery, which is doing work in a magical economy to pursue private gain at others' expense. Pues viven afuera y nadie pasa tiempo adentro, solamente si están enfermos o si están haciendo algo malo. Es lo que piensan. At 5 p.m. on Tuesday, January 12th, therefore, when the great tremor struck, most people would have been safely outside. And as for the relative few who might have been indoors when the quake happened, the modest style and scale of most homes probably boded well for them as well. Pues cuando pasó el temblor de la tierra, casi todo el mundo estaba afuera. Most dwellings por los que estaban adentro, aquí están las razones para que no murieron tampoco. Most dwellings are small, and there are multiple exits. Typically, each room has its own exit door and a potential escape to the outside. The older houses are made of hand-sewn planks of wood. Here's an example. Wattle and daub, and topped by thatch or corrugated zinc roofs. The homes built since 1983, after the massive boat exodus to South Florida, virtually all homes financed by migrants are made of cinder block. The straight and regular cinder blocks signify higher status than the imperfect homes of wattle and daub and plaster, even though the blocks were often lacking adequate reinforcing steel bars and a safe ratio of cement to sand. Cinder block is ideal for standing up to hurricane, wind, and rain. But in this unanticipated earthquake, the cinder block walls in the interiors and the exteriors were death traps. Pressure to keep up with the migrant-funded housing boom has accelerated the building of larger homes with cement roofs in anticipation of a second story, like this house in the foreground. And then you see the older style in the background. Some of these hulking symbols of distant migrants' lives back home were damaged or destroyed by the earthquake. Although the vast majority of the dwellings are relatively unscathed, no one is sleeping in them. Fear of subsequent quakes and tremors keep them spending the nights outdoors. Pues dije que la forma de esas casas también les ayudaron en el temblor de la tierra. Y que los migrantes tienen que representar el éxito perfecto, su éxito afuera, en casas más y más grande, más y más amplio y hecho de cinder block concreto, sí. Even today, people will not sleep in homes that are intact. The people of Corridor are passing the nights outside, as my friend Timothy, who grew up in the Blue House there, said with bitter humor, "Yap dormi en bas les belles étoiles." So Timothy, who speaks Creole and is competent in French, was speaking during our conversation to me only in Creole, and then she suddenly code-switched to French to reformulate this experience with bitter irony. And in a mere 3 words of French, she invoked the multiple historical structures of social, linguistic, and economic inequality. Most residents of Corridor have erected shelters out of bed sheets, which offer, as you know, no protection from the rain. And here's a picture of where they're sleeping. A few are sleeping in the vehicles purchased by migrants to be used during their home visits. Some are in what they call tentes, which are camping tents designed not for surviving a disaster, but for recreational exercise in constructing nature and escaping civilization, an exotic exercise, an exotic idea for the people of Corridor. And just as an aside, so digo que están durmiendo en tiendas. Yeah. Inclusive los que usan los norteamericanos y otras turistas que quieren tener la experiencia de la natura, sí, y que es una idea loco para esa gente. También están durmiendo en los camiones y carros que compraron los migrantes para sus visitas en la casa. And just as an aside, my own foray into buying some tents, I bought them off Craigslist, and I ended up at the home of a man who has been unemployed for 2 years. He lives in the city of Chicago. And so it was just interesting for me how my efforts to buy tent for these folks brought me into contact with someone else who was experiencing the Great Recession over a prolonged period and surviving by buying and selling things like tents on Craigslist. In yet another irony, these people are squatting in a fallow field that once was theirs. The land was purchased by an ancestor whose nickname was Tonton Ongu. He was one of their 19th century founding ancestors who are referred to as premier maître ou maîtresse habitation. And they're revered for having taken ownership of the property that would guarantee their and their descendants' economic freedom. The memories of these founding freeholders are honored at the beginning of every religious ceremony. The field where the folks of Corridor are squatting now was taken from them in the first decade of the 20th century in a series of legal swindles by a powerful elite businessman from Port-au-Prince. His name was Joseph Lacombe. Some of the wealth he siphoned from this rural section went toward building a chateau in the Pyrenees, on which he bestowed the nostalgic name Ville à Léogane. Pues quiero decir que es una ironía muy fuerte, que donde están ahora fue su tierra, pero alguien lo les robó y era legal y era un mulato de la clase alta. Y en mi investigación yo encontré que él robó esa tierra y robó mucha tierra en los años 1094, 5, etc. Y con el dinero construyó un chateau en Francia, en los Pyrenees, y le llamó Ville à Léogane, con ese nombre nostálgico. And for those of you, the historians here, you might be interested to know that I was able to document the stories, the myths that you talked about, the real myths that people were telling me, especially the Grand Moon, the older folks were talking about how this Met Dame, this con artist from the city named Joseph Lacombe had taken the land from them. And he was so greedy for land that he would loan people money and he would even give them a turkey. with the idea, so they told these stories with the to try to talk about how he legally swindled them of their land. And what he was doing was he was exploiting the gap between the legal system and the traditional legal system. Because in the traditional legal system, the land was owned by the family in common, and nobody could sell the land except if every member of the heritage of the land-holding family agreed to its sale. But what he would do would be treat these agents as individual owners. And so as a result of one individual member of these huge families getting indebted to him, the whole family would lose a big piece of land. Where they have their tents right now is on land that Tonton Ogun's heirs lost to Joseph Lacombe through such a swindle. And the people were telling me these stories, and I went to the tax bureau in the town of Léogane, which was a room about the size of a closet, and I just asked if they had any records. And the single man working there, a very simple room with just a desk and a telephone, said I could look in their closet. And I went into, a coat closet, and there were these books, these old books. And sure enough, there was the proof of what Joseph Lacombe had done, and the entries of every piece of land that he took was there. And I was able to prove that between 1904 and 1905, he took more land than any other individual. And so when people said to me that he owned land from the tip of the mountain at Fondois down to the sea, they weren't kidding. And he consolidated vast territories in Léogane. And so I talk about all this in my book. You can read more of it later. But just to say, it's inaccurate to say that the Americans took away the land from the people in Léogane. Lacombe set the land concentration in motion. And he was so successful, if you will, that when Hasco, the Haitian American Sugar Company, came in, interested in sugarcane production in Léogane, they had only to lease Lacombe's land to get enough to make their enterprise in Léogane viable. Okay. The quotidian practices of these rural communities, like Corridor, I believed, pulled them through the earthquake relatively unscathed. With tragic irony, their same adaptations to marginality are now threatening their survival. Courir pour la pluie, tomber la rivière. Run to get out of the rain, fall into the river. This peuple à misère did not store much food. They did not have cabinets or closets in their homes to store food and keep it out of reach of pests, nor the refrigeration to keep the food fresh. And these lacus, these compounds, don't have electricity. Furthermore, their ethic of generosity dictates that if you have more than you can use, you have to distribute it. Hoarding is immoral, and it has serious sorcerous implications. Hence, people tend to buy food daily, and when they do buy it, it's usually in small quantities that they can afford. A spoonful of tomato paste, 1 bouillon cube, a cupful of beans, rice, or cornmeal. After the earthquake, the squatters were staving off their hunger with breadfruit and sharing whatever food they could get with one another because they hadn't stored up any food. So digo que esa gente viven en una manera que les ayudó, sobresalió del temblor de la tierra, pero estas mismas prácticas ahora están al centro de sus problemas de sobrevivir. Y digo también que, por ejemplo, no compran comida en gran cantidades y compran solamente lo que pueden usar al día. Y es un sin, es un pecado no dar, es un pecado. Hoard es tener mucho, acumular, sí. Y si tiene que dar, yeah. Corridor is a lush coastal hamlet, an agricultural site. Why would the residents of Corridor be running out of nourishment? The rich soil is cultivated, but produces little food. The main crop planted is not a source of nourishment, but rather what Sidney Mintz called a drug food, sugarcane. The violent colonization of the island and the labor of African slaves in Léogane and the other plains of Saint-Domingue, in particular, advanced the production of sugarcane to be transformed into sugar, molasses, and rum. These proletarian hunger killers, another term Sidney Mintz used, reproduced, just barely, the burgeoning working classes of Europe. The increasingly desperate situation in Corridor today is the legacy of that past. Moreover, the rum economy is centered in the nearby city, also known by the name of Léogane, and most of that is in utter ruins, along with most of the guildives or distilleries. Digo que es una tierra muy rica, ¿ya? Pero no plantan comida. ¿Por qué? Porque plantan, cultivan can azúcar, que no es una comida. Es lo que mi profesor Sidney Mintz llamó una comida droga. Yeah. Why do the owners of the tiny plots interspersed between the large fields owned by outsiders continue planting sugarcane on their own tiny plots rather than food? One reason is that sugarcane is a hardy plant, requiring little labor after the heavy work of preparing the field and periodic weeding. It practically grows by itself. This pattern reproduces an economic system that actually has a scarcity of manual labor to pay for or provide for the labor to cultivate more labor-intensive crops, or where there's a source of water to dig and maintain irrigation canals. Digo, ¿por qué o para qué plantan cana azúcar y no comida? Hay varias explicaciones, inclusive que hay una scarcity, es una falta de mano de obra. More and more imported food, and white rice from the United States in particular, is the other reason why Corridor's vestigial peasants do not produce food. These imports undercut farmers who grow more nutritious plantains, yams, millet, squash, sweet potatoes, and other carbohydrates. The labor to produce these more nutritional foods, which are actually classed in Creole as vivre, from the word to live, to signify their life-giving value, exceeds the return on their sale. This phrasing alerts us to the profound human consequences of these dietary changes, the shift from more nutritious sources of vivre to processed white rice. Even in the early 1980s, when I began my fieldwork in Corridor, people did not consume rice on a daily basis. In the Laku where I lived, that you've seen photos of, plates of rice mixed with red or black beans were circulated once a week on Sunday or for another special meal. And on the other days, they ate meals whose centerpiece was vivre. Digo que cuando viví en este área en los años 80, nadie comió arroz más que una vez a la semana. Comieron plátanos, papas dulces, pitimi es quinoa, parece quinoa y otras cosas. Y digo que hay mucha significación en la palabra que usan. Todas esas cosas se llaman vida o manera de víveres. Es igual. Okay, ustedes saben. Okay. The transformation of the Haitian diet from locally grown víveres, víbora is a snake, yeah. The transformation of the Haitian diet from locally grown víveres, life-giving foods, to lower quality imported and processed food was neither accidental nor random. Peasant Haiti, heir to a colonial structure ostensibly restricted to monocrop export production, had long imported North American wheat flour and other foods. The import market was not fully developed, however, until after the Marines landed and the United States strengthened its role as the primary source of Haiti's food imports. The memoirs of Arthur Millspaugh, who was the chief administrator of the occupation, indicate that transforming patterns of the consumption of ordinary Haitians was an explicit objective of his administration. Millspaugh regarded as one of his greatest achievements the tenfold expansion of Haitian imports of rice. Today, the tiny population of Haiti, made smaller still by the disaster, is the fourth largest importer of white rice from the United States. Since 1995, under the IMF's guidance, Haiti has offered the most favorable tariff rates on rice in the world. In 1999, Haiti earned the top score, #1, on the IMF's Index of Trade Restrictiveness. Bill Clinton was the President of the United States, while Haitian consumption of American rice grew so robustly. His leverage in the process was strengthened by his administration's role in mediating the political crisis in Haiti, which culminated in the return, in 1994, of exiled President Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Parties in Haiti which had organized in opposition to import substitution were persecuted or killed by the forces that ousted Aristide, and the terms of his return effectively obviated any remaining resistance. Pues, fue durante los años 90 que los haitianos empezaron a comer mucho arroz blanco del Norteamérica, y fue el presidente Bill Clinton que ayudó mucho en este proceso. Y ahora Haiti es el país más favorable a la importación de arroz. Y ganaron la nota A o la nota 1 en la importación de arroz sin impuestos. Yeah. A decade and a half later, right, moving from 1994, President Clinton was appointed to lead the United Nations and the U.S.'s recovery efforts in Haiti. On March 20th, 2010, former President Clinton apologized for his role in forcing the Haitian state to betray its farmers under pressure from the U.S. and IMF Union. And he admitted that it's only created more hunger. Clinton stated to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, quote, "It may have been good for some of my farmers in Arkansas, but it has not worked. It was a mistake. I had to live every day with the consequences of the loss of capacity to produce a rice crop in Haiti to feed these people because of what I did, nobody else," unquote. Así que el presidente Clinton pidió perdón, disculpa. Since President Clinton's apology was reported in the media, though not on front-page headlines, civil society was once again called to their ritual role of absolving the sins of their Southern Baptist president, a role we had become all too familiar with since his entry into national politics. The secular ritual of sin, apology, and pardon, however, does not affect the same redemptive reaction in Haitian society. And when I was considering how Clinton's Apology of the Year might be received by Haitians, the verses of a famous Chanté-Lois or spirit song came to mind. The song is well known, some of you know it, and it's been recorded on many albums of religious music. And it's in honor of the Loa Ibo. It goes like this: Ayama Ibo lele, lele lele, Ayama Ibo lele. You're singing Upile pie moi dim pardon, sa pardon qu'a fait pour moi. The last time I gave it, I made Robert sing the song, but I'm not going to make him do it again. He's not listening. He's reading his email. Okay. So to quote the lyrics of the song, Clinton's apology doesn't do anything to change the policy he foisted upon Haitian food producers and consumers in the past. He oversees a disaster relief program which did not even consider circulating food grown in Haiti. And remember, most of Haiti was untouched by the earthquake. If the apology had been effective, rice would not make up the bulk of the food rations being distributed by relief organizations today. Mercina's family, who reside in the town of Léogane, have received 2 small kits of food, enough to feed a family for 1 day. And they also received a 50-pound bag of white rice. The alleged rescue only makes them more committed to a nutritionally deficient and economically unstable regimen of imported white rice. Pues, la disculpa que pidió President Clinton no quiere decir nada, porque hasta ahora la mayor parte de la comida que entra es arroz blanco de Arkansas o norteamericana. Indeed, on the same day Clinton testified to Congress, President Préval visited the White House. The president addressed the need to reverse the profound social and economic transformation propelled by the import substitution program. According to the media report I read, he said, quote, "The emergency phase of recovery is over, and continued food aid will only disrupt Haiti's economy. Better to focus on seeds and fertilizers so people can be employed while food is grown locally," unquote. Cheap imports and hunger-postponing food aid have undercut local farming on the land staked out by the Premier and Premier Maîtresse Bitation, the founders of the estates, which they left for their heirs. The abysmal return farmers receive for their crops keep them mired in poverty. This cycle just pushes their children to disdain farming and prepare to leave. The contradictory process has transformed this society from producers of food to producers of migrants for export and consumers of migrants' wage remittances and imported food. Que solamente continúa ese proceso que transforma esa población rural desde cultivadores, ¿no? Que producen comida hasta migrantes que trabajan afuera para ganar dinero, para enviar y para que su familia adentro compran comida de afuera. Sí, gracias. Thus, Corridor is a vestigial peasant village. Its people eke out a livelihood through farming, primarily sugarcane, fishing, and marketing of the food. Yet their main economic activities seem to be producing low-cost labor for export, consuming wage remittances and imported food, and reabsorbing migrants when their capacity to work elsewhere expires. In 2006, migrants from Corridor contributed to the more than $1.65 billion sent from Deo back home. But since 2007, Deo, or over there, has barely been offering a livelihood to those inside. The implosion of the Florida economy, where most of the Corridor immigrants reside, has hit immigrants hard, and these immigrants cluster in the construction and service industries. Many of the adults have experienced prolonged unemployment for the first time. Some have been without paid work for more than 2 years. Before the earthquake, there were reports of reverse remittances. People in Léogane, in other words, were liquidating investments or borrowing to send money to migrants in Florida to help them pay their mortgages and avoid foreclosure. They sold their investments in land, livestock, and borrowed funds. Indeed, the despair in the immigrant neighborhoods in Broward County is so deep that when Mercina returned to Delray Beach after a 3-week visit to the devastation in the town of Léogane, she declared upon her return that her neighborhood in Delray was more depressed than her neighborhood in Léogane. quiero decir que los migrantes también tienen muchos problemas, desde la depresión, la gran recesión que empezó